Well, let's think for a minute. Good morning? Yeah, it's morning. It's about 11 o'clock here. And I thought I'd do a little video on what worked when I overwintered this greenhouse. Now, springtime is coming. It's not here yet. It is March the 8th right now. But things are warming up. The deep freezes during the night have pretty well stopped. It still gets below freezing every night, or just about every night, but it doesn't get much lower than that. So it's warming up, and before I start overhauling this greenhouse and start planting new stuff, because it is warming up, I thought I'd just run through and tell you and show you what worked for overwintering and what didn't. Now keep in mind, I didn't keep this greenhouse really warm. The goal I had was just to keep it from freezing in here. So during the winter, I bet the average temperature in here was probably something like 40 degrees, somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees, which really isn't good for plants. They don't like that. But some plants survive well, they just don't grow very well. So let me show you some of those things. Okay, the first thing I want to show you is celery. Now this celery is in a floating raft system, but this overwintered nicely. We actually harvested celery off of this all through the winter. Now it slowed way down. It didn't grow nearly as fast as it does when it's a little bit warmer than this, but it worked. It went really well. Now here's a couple of other things that are it's interesting. See all these aphids on here. It seemed like I didn't have an aphid problem during when it's warm in here, but I do now. But they don't seem to be eating anything. They're just setting on things for some reason. Anyway, these were some small beets that I dug up that were too small to eat, but I put them in here to see what they would do. As you can see, they're big enough to eat and harvest now. So they grew like this throughout the winter. Now, of course, if the weather is warmer, you know, they'll grow a lot better, a lot bigger, and a lot faster than that. But I'm going to pull these out, and we will chop those up and eat them. Now, there's some more celery over here. Same story. It survived. It grew. It's healthy. It just slows way down. And I had some leaks. I had some leeks in here. Same story. They survive well. They just don't grow very fast when it's that cold. And let's go over here. Now, of course, grapes. These just went dormant over the winter, but they survived. They'd survive in the cold anyway. But look at this. They're already sprouting grapes. Look at that. It's a little pod, I guess you'd call it, of grapes. See these things? They're grapes. They're already sprouting grape, whatever you call it, grape bunches of grapes. See, there's another one. You know, those are little bunches of grapes growing. So that won't be long before they are giving me some grapes. And let's go over here and I'll show you the. See, this is the other side, and you can see there's some sprouts here along the bottom. Now I've already trimmed this up for the year. But see, sprouts are starting to grow, but up near the top, there is a lot of activity there. So we'll see what kind of a grape harvest we get. We got a real good grape harvest last year. Now, we'll go over here. These tomatoes were planted sometime before, in the late fall last year. As you can see, they grew through the year, but they grew very slowly. This little string in November, you see this little string here, it's right there. That was in November how tall it was. And you can see it's still grown some, but not very much. So they survived, and they're doing okay. Now, these tomatoes were just, producing like gangbusters. And I left them in because what I was hoping was that, when the weather warmed up, that they would start producing again, because if you can see those stems, they're big stems. Theoretically, they should support a pretty good plant. But right now, I would think by now I should have started seeing some sprouts, suckers coming off of them, but I haven't seen it yet. I'll give it another little while, and maybe they just died. I don't know, that's probably what happened. But anyway, over here, this is some Romanesco cauliflower that I put in. Now, this was again in November, but this went all winter long, and it was cold in here. And they didn't like the cold. They survived. They did fine, but they didn't grow. But now they're starting to grow. I'm starting to get heads on them. But they're not the size I would like, but they're doing all right. I guess they're alive, put it that way. Got some more over here, and this is fennel. And these kind of leaned over, and I was just going to let them die and clean them up. But look at that, they've started re-sprouting. Same thing with that one over there. So that's kind of interesting. And again, this is broccoli. They were sprouted last year. We cut them. I just left them in. But as you can see, they're starting to grow again. And look at this. There is I didn't notice that until just now. There is new growth. I mean, sprouts or suckers coming off of these. And I kind of wonder now, if I let these grow, would they start producing heads? Look at that. There's one here and one here. Well, there's the answer, maybe. There's a flower right there. Maybe they won't. But anyway, then there's some cabbage that I let grow last year, and didn't harvest these, but they're still alive. And this is through the winter. Cold in here. Now, this is kale. Kale is hanging on, but it didn't like this at all. And there's some new carrots that kind of. See, this was planted in 20 November with all this kale. And we've gotten a little bit of kale off of this, but it doesn't look too healthy. But maybe when it warms up, it'll do better. Now, this is surprising. These beets were planted, I think, in November. And if you could ignore the aphids, see, they're a tubular-looking beet. I can't remember the name of it, but look at that. They have actually grown. They've actually done okay, even considering how cold it is. Even considering how cold it is, they've actually done quite well. And this has grown from November until now, March. So they did well. Okay, now the asparagus went dormant, which was what I expected. But look at that, it's starting to sprout. And we have been pulling asparagus off of here and eating it. See, there's another one back there. And it's really delicious, especially when it's small like that. Well, that's tasty. Now, let's look over here. This Swiss chard was planted in November as well, and it probably has done better than any of the things in here. As you can see it's getting quite big. It's healthy. It lasted all through the winter. It just grew quite slowly, but it grew steadily, and that's kind of interesting. So Swiss chard is a good winter product. So I imagine if I would have just had it maybe 50 to 60 degrees in here all the time instead of 40 to 50, this would have probably done much better. Now over here is some more celery that's planted in the soil here, and it's done quite well. Same story on that. And these peppers actually were, if you can see those, they were actually growing through the winter. They're still green, but I don't know if they're going to come back or not. But yeah, there's a pepper right there. But anyway, they're alive. And these are strawberries. Of course, they survived the winter, and it looks like they're giving us some strawberries right now. But here's some spinach. Now, again, this was planted back in November. And because it's so cold in here, it grew, it survived, it's healthy, but it's only this tall. Now, I noticed lately in the last week, you can see that it is growing faster. Now, here's some red sales lettuce that I just sprinkled a bunch of seeds out here in November. As you can see, it hasn't grown very much, but it has survived quite well. It looks very healthy. And now I've noticed, like with this, again, like in the last couple of weeks, it seems to have started to increase in its growing speed. So They survive in the winter, but they don't do well unless you keep the heat up. So, one lesson for me. So I guess the lesson learned here for me is, you know, you can do a greenhouse in the wintertime, and you can grow things, even if you're in a latitude like we are, where, you know, the sunshine, the time the sun is shining is much less during the wintertime than in the summertime. But there is enough sunshine to grow a lot of different things. But apparently you've got to have the greenhouse warmed up most of the time. In other words, 70, 80 degrees during the daytime. If you can do that, and at nighttime keep it 60 degrees, don't let it get much colder than that at night, probably do quite well. So anyway, I just thought I'd let you know before I start tearing this place up and start replanting things and getting rid of these experiments. So anyway, have a good day.